What's up everyone, Thralls here once again. I'm Necrotic Nick, and I have another album review for you. And this one is kind of an interesting one. I wasn't sure if I was going to review this one, but after listening to it, I kind of feel like I have to. We're going to go over the newest album from Converge, Blood Moon 1. This comes out on Epitaph Records on the 19th of November. This is the band's 10th album, formed in 1990 in Salem, Massachusetts. I'm a longtime fan. They were one of my introductions to metalcore in general, and this album is very different from anything that they have done because this is a collaboration and almost kind of a separate project, but it's still labeled as Converge. Now, this is essentially a collaboration that came about a few years ago in terms of a live performance, I believe, and then they decided to record. Now, this includes Mistress of the Dark, gloomy and doomy Chelsea Wolfe, and Ben Chisholm from her band, Chelsea Wolfe, and Stephen Brodsky from Cave In and Mutoid Man as well. Now, I believe the original version of this actually included Steve Von Till from Neurosis, but he is not actually on here. And of course, the rest of the band is Converge. And of course, because it's Converge, Kurt Ballou did the production, and of course, the production's awesome because Kurt Ballou is incredible production, especially the drums. The drums always sound so fucking good in his records. But like I said, this is very different. This is probably the least Converge sounding Converge album I have heard. Aside from a few moments on here, this is really kind of all over the place. It's doom-laden, it's sludgy, not a lot of like metalcore, honestly, and loads of atmosphere. This is a mostly dark and dreary album, but it kind of has interesting mood flips all over the place. Now, I knew it was going to be different when I heard the first single, which I believe was the title track, Blood Moon, which opens up the album and is the longest track in the album at almost 8 minutes long. And this thing is a long, slow building, just bleak, dreary, I would say doom metal song. Like, again, not a lot of the usual tropes that you expect from Converge are on here. This is them definitely kind of outside of what they usually do. And one thing that struck me as something very different is the fact that Jacob Bannon is doing clean vocals on here. Now, I know he kind of flirted with that before, but not to this extent, and he's doing these really cool trade-offs with Chelsea Wolfe, which her voice is very breathy and everything sounds bleak, like she's in a smoke-filled jazz dive bar, just her in front of the microphone with one spotlight on her, and she's just not having a good time. It's pretty much every performance on here. Like, she never sounds happy, and honestly, I think that really works with the vibe of this album because it is a dark listen. It's very cathartic, and this song kicks it off in bleak fashion. It's long, it takes a while to build up, and it builds to more negative emotions. Like, it just keeps getting more and more bleak, and then Jacob starts screaming in there, and she counters it with her clean vocals. The guitar tones on here are just sludgy and dirty, and I think Stephen Brodsky might have something to do with that just in terms of the guitar tone as well, because I know Kurt's tone is just nasty, but there's a little bit of extra fuzzy sludginess to it, and that kind of screams more Stephen Brodsky in terms of like Mutoid Man and Cave In. And I have a hunch when it came down to the writing, everyone was really involved in this because, again, everyone's styles sort of come out in this. Well, most of their styles do. The style that doesn't really come out as much on here is honestly Converge. You don't really get like their high octane metalcore in terms of their faster material. In fact, the only bit you get is in the beginning of Viscera of Man, which starts off with what you expect from Converge. It is high octane, there's a D beat, it's punky as hell, Ben is just pounding the shit out of the drums, and then it takes the hardest right turn into doom, and Chelsea essentially just takes over on that one. That is probably the only moment, that very beginning moment, that really sounded like Converge for a moment. And then the rest of it is sort of Converge adapting to everyone else's writing. Most of the first 4 tracks on here really kind of sound more like Chelsea Wolfe's style in terms of blending like folk and gothic and doom and kind of just building up into this nice little dark ball of misery, but, you know, making it tuneful. Songs like Coil, which are sort of playful but kind of bleak and depressing. There's a fun little piano line in there, and Jacob and Chelsea are exchanging really cool, clean vocals and harmonizing, and it has this, I don't know, it kind of reminds me a bit of like a Danny Elfman score, except they're covering it and making it much more dark and cathartic versus being entirely playful with it. And then Flower Moon kind of starts getting a little bit heavier, but it's kind of different. It feels like an Alice in Chains song. I think this is where Stephen Brodsky's vocals start coming in more. And I think Stephen Brodsky was a big writing influence on this, because the whole middle section of this really feels like his style of writing. Like, again, Cave In and Mutoid Man, it has his sort of odd riff structure, his fun harmonies that are also heavier than hell. And there's a lot of 90s alternative. Flower Moon, again, has like kind of an Alice in Chains vibe, but it's also like a really heavy, sludgy version of Radiohead in spots. But when you get down to the middle three tracks, Failure Forever, Lord of Liars, and Tongues Playing Dead, I felt like I was listening to old school grunge again, but like really more obscure grunge, like, you know, Dinosaur Jr., maybe Helmet kind of mixed in there, and maybe some Queens of the Stone Age. It takes on a different feel. Stephen Brodsky's writing is definitely different than Chelsea's or Converge's on this. Again, there's that sort of playfulness, there's that kind of 90s alternative, but there's also sludge metal in there. And those songs are, I wouldn't say upbeat, because I'm sure the subject matter is still dark as hell, but they feel more up-tempo, more rocky. They're not slow and sludgy. It's just very different. And that really kind of gives this album a very interesting feel. It doesn't necessarily feel like one band's album. It kind of feels like 3 EPs kind of smushed together to form an album with a dominant writer on each EP. And again, it's kind of weird. I think the dominant writers on this, at least, you know, in terms of the overall feeling, in terms of being able to hear their individual styles come through, would definitely be Chelsea Wolfe and Stephen Brodsky. Converge, I guess, is kind of just homogenized in there in terms of their sound, but it feels like they adapted more to Stephen Brodsky and Chelsea Wolfe. And I don't know, it has such an odd feel. Going back to Viscera of Men, that song feels so all over the place and so disjointed, like that quick punky beginning that is never revisited. It completely fucks off the album after that. Pretty much the most instantly recognizable Converge element just kind of disappears and then goes into weird gothic passages, and it has these abrupt transitions that are just kind of odd. That song just kind of feels like a hodgepodge, like they just had multiple ideas that maybe didn't fit in other songs and they kind of threw it in this one, and it's just kind of off-putting. It doesn't come together very well, and it just gets kind of confusing. Like, it feels kind of directionless, and when it ends, you're just kind of going, huh? Now, towards the end of the album, I think it comes together a little bit better, mainly because they add more like blues and folk elements. Scorpion Sting kind of has that dreary country road sort of feel. You know, it's out in the West, tumbleweeds, except, you know, it's gothic, so it's nighttime, I guess. But I really dig the vibe of this song. Chelsea takes the lead, I think, pretty much in the writing and in terms of the vocals as well. And it just has this really cool, like, smooth, dreary sound throughout. And then Diamond actually makes it a little bit heavier, kind of brings in more post-metal elements, but you get a really cool vocal duet between Steven and Chelsea on it, and it makes for a really cool, like, just dreary doom song. It's weird. Kind of at this point, I almost forgot I was listening to a Converge album because, again, the Converge elements didn't feel as prominent on there. It's just felt like really good music, period. Like, just heavy, but really good and kind of nondescript. Like, it's kind of all over the place in terms of genres and influences, but really well executed and very, very somber. Like, this entire album is very sad, might need therapy. This might be the therapy, I don't know. But I would definitely say there's an amount of catharsis to this listen. Like, it feels like a outpouring of just negative emotion. This album overall just feels like a weird journey with odd pit stops, like, you know, the dimly lit gas station that's like the last one for 300 miles or some shit. And the attendant's very lonely, wants to tell you some horrible stories about his pet lizard. I would advise just buying the gas and maybe a Snickers bar and getting the fuck out of there. But it kind of has that feel. It's just sort of strange. It kind of goes over a lot of different terrains, but there's kind of that uniformity thing. Like, it doesn't necessarily feel like a full album by one band necessarily. And I know you have guests on there throughout the entire album, so it is going to kind of feel like that. But the way it's set up, if you took the first 4 tracks, the middle 3 tracks, and then the last 4 tracks, you would have 3 EPs that had a little bit more of a uniform sound. And I think it would flow a little bit better, and I think the ideas wouldn't sound as jumbled. The earlier part of the album took some getting used to, but honestly, it's the back half and that really interesting middle that really drew me in more. But the overall effect is mystifying. Like, it's kind of a head scratcher of a release, but for the most part, I'd say it's pretty good. So overall, I'm gonna give this 3.5 stars. Not all of this gelled with me, but over time and getting through the album more, I like what they're doing. It is so far removed from Converge, just in terms of 90% of this, I would say. Even like the slowest moments in Converge's songs in the past don't necessarily sound like this. There's a lot more ambiance, a lot more layering, vocally very different, but it does come together pretty well. And when it does, these are some really epic and interesting songs. The vocal trade-offs are really cool. The mood is very interesting. I almost wanted to call it Nick Converge. But all jokes aside, it's a really interesting listen, and I don't know, if you're just looking for something different out of Converge, I definitely say check it out. I can see where this would be possibly divisive with some fans because, again, it is pretty far removed from what Converge usually does. But I think over time this is probably going to grow on me more. I know I really like most of it, especially the stuff towards the back half. I feel like they just got the dial set right in terms of atmosphere and melodies and pretty much everything. But yeah, I think if this was separated into 3 EPs like I had brought up, I think I'd be able to get into 2 of them, like a lot. But yeah, definitely check it out. Form your own opinions on this one because I sense this is going to be an interesting discussion when it comes down to this album. But yeah, definitely give it a chance at least because it's a weird listen, but pretty damn good. So if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up. And if you are new to the channel, subscribe because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there will be a link down below. We also have shirts available. If you would like to get one, hit us up on thrallsofmetal@gmail.com. Send us a message, put shirts then. We will get back to you and hopefully get you a shirt. We are eventually going to be reloading on merch. And again, if you have any suggestions for stuff we should carry, hit us up in the comments and we'll definitely check that out and see if those are doable. Plus, this will be stuff for you, so it would be great to get your input because you guys are what keep us going. So with that, I thank you all for watching once again, and we will catch you later.